picturesque Tarbagatai Mountains. Among the massive stones, the green valley of Eleke Sazy. Just a few kilometers to the east is its border with China. In the era that we'll talk about in this episode, people lived in a completely different place. This is the point that they chose as the starting point of their nomadic life. The history of the Eleke Sazy Valley is very interesting, just as the once formidable patrimony of the pharaohs and pyramids turned into modern Egypt, and today's Greece recalls the ancient achievements that gave the European world a cultural foundation. So this land, sleeping soundly asleep, knew a completely different time. 3,000 years ago, the valley was chosen by numerous and powerful Saka tribe as a place for the last refuge of their leaders. Then, for 1,000 years, this land plunged into oblivion in order to burst into the information flow of the 21st century with sensations. We believe this is a sacred space specially chosen by the priests. Before that, no one knew about this area, although there are more than 500 mounds with 5 large mound groups. Near Akswat, they excavated ordinary mounds in the 80s of the last century. Akan Ongaruli is our Virgil in this ancient world of mounds. He's an archaeologist, candidate of historical sciences, head of the Research Institute of the National Museum of Kazakhstan, Eleke Sazy. He told us that the research in the Eleke Sazy Valley began after an anonymous report about a group of illegal diggers who dug a mound nearly 6 years ago. The scientists showed us photos of gold items that were found in the mound, and these artifacts are of exceptional value. They are similar to the artifacts found in the famous Arjan II mound in Tuva. Unfortunately, the findings disappeared without a trace, but archaeologists found a new place to study. The very first exploration brought stunning results. The Eleke Sazy Valley is a huge necropolis, the likes of which has never been found before. The research began in 2016, and the most important discovery of recent years, the Golden Man from Eleke Sazy, was made in 2018. The Golden Man was 400 years older than the Golden Man found in Issyk. Meanwhile, large treasures were also found in 2019 and 2020. For several years, scientists have been preparing to excavate the 2 largest burial mounds of the valley. The archaeological excavations were conducted under the leadership of Doctor of Historical Sciences Zainullah Samashev, while the project is headed by Akan Ongaruli. Usually archaeologists give names to new objects, but this mound is so unique, and that is why it is called simply a big mound. Its diameter is 80 meters, height is 5 meters, and today we will study its internal structure. Of 7 kurgan groups, the group that includes this elite structure consists of 56 buildings. All of the buildings were located in a chain 1.5 kilometers long. The detachment has been working at the facility for almost 2 months. The work starts with a general topographic survey, and then a study of the layers of monument begins. The excavation area of the field was 1,500 square meters. First of all, in order to fully investigate the structure of the mound, we entered from 4 sides using a trench method and examined the structure of the embankment. After we fully studied the structure, we began to gradually expand the excavation in the middle, and we continued to study further. The large mound is located at an altitude of 1,402 meters above sea level. The parameters of the embankment demands respect. Here, all the layers are clearly visible. It is clear from which layers the mound was built. We transfer all this to millimeter paper. The scale is 1 to 20.
Яғни мына жердің 20 сантиметріміз, мына жерге 1 сантиметр.
And that is 20 centimeters of this wall is transferred here by 1 centimeter, 5 centimeters to 1 meter. On the scale, we will make an exact drawing of each layer and each stone.
Тасын әрбір қабатын саламыз. Бұл жерде біздің көріп отырғанымыздай ең негізгі 3 қабат бар. Ең төменгі қабат.
As we can see, there are 3 main layers here. The most basic is called the sod layer, and this is a layer of clay soil. This clay was brought here from the swampy area, which is mainly located around us. Since they were brought from different places, it's of different colors. On top of the clay, there's a layer of yellow loam mixed with crushed stone, which in turn is covered by a stone shell. All this flaky cake is completed with humus and sod, overgrown with grass, pierced by holes of marmots. Galimjan Kiasbek told us that he comes from the Almaty region. He dreamed of being a traveler since childhood. He learned about archaeology specialty when he enrolled into Kazgu. Since his student days, he has been out in the field for 23 years. He also participated in 70 expeditions and believes that this way his childhood dream has come true. Well, the scientist has certain tasks in the detachment.
Сол менің міндетім сол осы жердің жалпы топографиясын жасау.
My task is to create a general topography of this place and work out the drawing and graphic work of individual mounds. After the grave is cleared, if we're lucky, we'll find the bones of a man. If we have more luck, we may find other artifacts. After all this has been cleared and photographed, my work begins. On this graph paper with a scale of 1/10, I draw the entire bone skeleton. On this paper, I draw all the objects found, showing where and how the objects were laid, and I made sure that each of the drawings are numbered.
Жатқан жерін түгел көрсетіп, оның да сызбасын сызып, нөмірлеп әрқайсысын.
At the beginning of the study, a crater was visible in the central part of the embankment, which unequivocally indicates a robbery of the mound in the past. But unlike illegal diggers, the scientists are in no hurry to find the gold used for funerals. For 3 years, they have been exploring the burial mounds in the valley and analyzing its architecture. They want to understand the secrets of the design of ancient engineers. For them, everything is interesting, from the stages of construction, the function of the crypts, the location of huge stones to labor costs. They also want to find out why were there rings stretched around the mounds. According to legends, the rings symbolize the separation of the living world from the dead. The rings were also practical, given that it served as a source of soil for the embankment. We date the mounds 8 to 7 centuries BC due to its external features. The alternation of stone layers is a technological method of the Saka builders so that tons of soil does not swell over time. It must be said that the past 3,000 years did not in any way affect the shape of the mound. Unlike people, the gravedigger thieves managed to work hard. Having studied the structure of the mound, archaeologists moved to the central structure above the burial. A large pit. According to the status and the size of the mound, it is normal. Was there a stone shell here too? No. Where did the stones come from then? Did they fall from above? The robbers did it. 40 to 45 people were involved in dismantling the sod and studying the structure of the embankment. There are 10 to 15 people working on the grave structure. Only those who have experience are involved in the more detailed part of the research. There are about 15 people for this. Meyerjan Kizirkhanov is one of the scientists who are involved with the project. He graduated from university named after Awezov in Semey with a degree in history and geography. He continued studying in the field of archaeology at the Kazakh State University. We are trying to determine the grave pit by the type of soil.
Ал мына шыққан топырақ жанеге, ол ішкі глина, қабырдың ішіне шыққан топырақ. По метрика бойынша ол 3-4.
As you can see, this yellow soil is a grave pit, and this one is an ancient surface of the earth.
Өйткені бұл тонаушылардың түскен ізіне байланысты жұмыс бәсеңдеу болады себебі.
But this soil is clay, the soil that comes out of the tomb.
Яғни сүйектер кездесуі мүмкін, керамика сынықтары кездесуі мүмкін болады.
Dromo stretches east from the grave spot. This is the name in such structures for stone corridors leading from the surface to the burial. Usually after the burial of the leader, the passage was completely filled out.
Как раз сол дромыс күмбез тәрізді ары қарай кетуі мүмкін, соның астына тас.
You see over there, a man's slate fell through, down there in the pit. These are all empty cavities. Perhaps there's a wooden deck and the passage may continue. Perhaps the burial of a person took place through the dromos. It comes to the surface. See a stone building there? It comes to the surface and possibly a person was lowered through it. At first they built the structure and after completion they descended from above and buried a person.
Сосын төбеден түсіп әкеп қоюу да мүмкін.
Archaeologists have carefully cleared both the burial pit and the 9-meter dromos. It turned out that at one time, both the burial and the dromos leading to it had a ceiling made of wooden poles. The burial itself collapsed over the centuries under a mass of soil or through the illegal digging of robbers. The corners of the grave pit are oriented to the cardinal points. The bottom was covered with rubble and wood flooring. Unfortunately, not even a trace of the crowned person was left in this mound. A pair of bones of sacrificial animals, a shard of ceramics and a small gold plate miraculously survived from the rich decoration. The work of archaeologists is watched by local residents. In their memory, they've never witnessed so much attention to the life of herders isolated among the mountains. Sometimes visitors from the regional center come here. This time, the staff of the Tarbagatai Museum of History and Local Law, which is located in the Aul Akswat, came to visit. The director of the museum said that the institution has existed since 1998, during which time the fund has collected 5,500 exhibits. In recent years, the team has rediscovered its native land for itself. Despite the fact that the employees have lived here all their lives, they knew about the ancient Acropolis only by hearsay. My father was the director of the museum for 30 years. He said that many riches are hidden in Eleke. This is how I first came to Eleke. My father came here and photographed the nature of Tarbagatai. These photographs are on display at the museum. In the nature department, one of the dioramas contains photographs of Eleke. On the one hand, it's correct that excavations are underway. Exhibits are found and shown to people. This is the history of our ancestors. Let the artifacts be exhibited in museums, where our children and tourists can see them and learn about our history and culture. All the findings from the Eleke Sazy Valley are sent to the Regional History and Local Law Museum by passing the District 1. All of the research in the region on archaeology development program is carried out under the Akim of East Kazakhstan region, Daniel Akhmetov. Akan Ongaruli and his team explored not only the large mound but also the area around the mound in the season. There is a moat and 20 altars as well as several small burials nearby. All these works along with the previous findings are included in the anthology of the discoveries of the Eleke Sazy Valley. For example, the ancient Turkic memorial complex Kagan, which previously had no analogues on the territory of Kazakhstan. Now we're going to look at an artifact that is being studied by archaeologists for 2 years.
Мы в 2007-2009
We worked in Mongolia in 2007 to 2009 and in 2013 until 2014. It was then that the question of Kazakh statehood was raised.
Древнетюркские такие есть, конечно, городища все эти средневековые, но
There are ancient Turkic settlements, of course. There are medieval settlements, but there are still no cult objects, burial objects in Kazakhstan. we offered to investigate the mound and all the stone statues in Mongolia and publish a book. We did excavations at 2 sites. There too, the Kagan cult ritual complex was excavated and fully explored. Scientists noticed the outlines of the complex in Eleke Sazy back in 2014. At the time, they were waiting for funding. The large artifact could be jewelry and is costly and located in the Saka mounds, but the value of the monument is enormous. Ancient Turkic history and culture are the basis for modern Turkic people. Today, on the territory of Kazakhstan, many ancient Turkic monuments have been thoroughly researched. Socio-economic relations were created and traditions of early nomads have been reconstructed. However, the grandiose Kagan princely memorial temples are found only in Mongolia, so the opening of the complex in Eleke Sazy is unprecedented.
Направление строго юго-восток. Заходите вот так. Здесь вал земляной специально, видите, да? То вот заходите вот так.
The direction is a strictly east. Come here. Here's a special earthen shaft. Again, a small number of people came here. We laugh, we say, from above it looks like Kobis. This part, walk like that. Such a narrow one. This is the height, no more than this. And so they went.
Вот такой узкий такой коридор. Бір адам ғана сияды. Где-то, наверное, высотой было вот такой.
Such a labyrinth. You walk like this. You mentally prepare for something.
Да, такой лабиринт, чтобы лишних ничего такого не было. Ходишь вот так. Наверное, уже готовишься.
There was some sort of altar here. There were traces of fire here too.
Все. Здесь алтарь был какой-то, непонятно какой, но здесь были следы огня. Вот здесь.
The winding labyrinth, along which when one enters it, would probably bring him to his knees toward a ritual room. Archaeologists have begun to study the altar. Next year, they plan to take samples of the soil and soot for laboratory research, and the findings will be released in the future. In the meantime, the complex is estimated to exist between 6 and 8 centuries AD. The total area of the excavation is 6,656 square meters. Akan Ongaruli participated in the Mongolian excavations. He notes the difference in the construction of the complex of the ancient Turks who lived in the territory of modern Mongolia. The complex attracted Chinese craftsmen, which was reflected in the architecture of the buildings. This complex is made exclusively in the steppe tradition. The series of passages ends with a stone temple, which today has turned into a 3-meter pile of slabs and boulders. Probably the initial form of the structure is a truncated square pyramid in plan, or this is a sequence of the collapse of the walls. Scientists also noticed the temple stone in mazars of later periods. During the construction of the temple, the inhabitants of the valley borrowed building material from their ancestors.
Mongolia возле там отсюда начиная там стоять там лев.
Usually in Mongolia, starting from here, there was a lion or some other statues of different social status of Kagan servants. Furthermore, the Kagan statues begin, but here, we do not find anything like that. The only Kagan statue, it was accidentally discovered, brought to the Akswat Regional Museum. Zainullah Samashev said that this is Kagan. The statue, until it appeared in the Rural Museum for a long time, served as a pillar between the territories of the 2 state farms. For a millennium and a half, it lost its head and arms, but the princely pose is guessed. A belt with pendants and weapons is visible. Now the rare statue adorns the exposition of the National Museum of the Republic. The place chosen for the monument by the ancient Turks is strategically convenient. Here is the road to the pass through the mountain range, and the view is majestic. The track stretches at the foot of the highest peak Tarbagatai Tastau. But first of all, in this choice, the Turks followed their ancestors, the Sakas, whose memory is kept by the Kurgans. Leaving Eleke Sazy, we visited 2 of the most famous mounds of the valley, and the first of them has a sad history.
Мына обаны 2019 жылы зерттедік, бірақ өкінішке орай
We studied this mound in 2019, but unfortunately, this third largest mound of 500 mounds in the valley was looted in 2014-2015. During the robbery, they used heavy equipment. They went in from this side and got to the middle and found a grave pit. The robbers went down 4 meters deep from the grave pit and took everything.
Өзінің қабір шұңқырын тауып, сол қабір шұңқырынан 4 метр тереңге түсіп, барлығын тонаған.
However, even a looted mound can bring a surprise. Under the stonework, archaeologists last year found a treasure with golden objects in the Saka animal style. Many forms were found by scientists for the first time. Now it is part of the magnificent collection of the regional museum. The events of 2018 developed exactly according to the same scenario, when a completely intact artifact was found next to the looted burial. And now there appeared a scientific reconstruction by a team of specialists under the leadership of scientist Eleke Sazy, who made the discovery in the exposition of the East Kazakhstan Regional Museum of History and Local Lore. The golden man of the early Saka period in the 8th century BC is unique in that after the Isik golden man, it is the second fully preserved and not plundered artifact. How does a representative of the Saka nobility appear before us, whose burial mounds we study so carefully today? Young man 18 years old, with a height of approximately 170 centimeters, Caucasian, clothes embroidered with gold beads. There is a torque on his neck, which is a sign of high social status. The warrior is armed with a bow and arrow and a dagger in a golden sheath. We could not finish our excursion into the history of the Sakas without a trip to the place where Kazakh archaeologists made the largest discoveries in this area, which became a world sensation, the Berel Valley. The path to the famous Valley of the Kings, as journalists called the Ancient Acropolis, is not a short one. Today, the Berel burial ground is a whole complex, united by the State Historical and Cultural Reserve Museum. The valley itself housed over 100 locations of burials, many of which are museumified. It also housed an archaeological camp and administrative buildings. Until 2013, the artifacts found on the Berel mounds were sent to the National Museum of the Republic of Kazakhstan for permanent residence. With the advent of the museum reserve, everything changed. The treasures found on this territory remained here. The fund now has more than 1,000 exhibits. The first sensational findings happened in 1998. Eleke Sazy investigated the Sars Mound number 11, the burial of a leader and a woman, 13 horses, which were all perfectly preserved in artificial permafrost. The man was lying on his back. Next to him was a woman with bent knees on her right side. The man's age was between 35 and 40 years old. The woman was 30 years older than this man. But based on the DNA genetic result, these two are mother and son. In the Berel Museum, there's a reconstruction of the Sars space from Mount 11 made in Gerasimov's laboratory in Moscow. Here you can also get acquainted with the brightest examples of the Saka animal style. Ancient craftsmen carved plots from wood and bones and uncovered the surface with gold foil. All items in the archaeology hall are original. There are fragments of horse skins, 2,500 years old, furs and textiles of the vestments of the buried, ceremonial saddles covered with red cloth, mirrors and ornaments. All the burial mounds from the valley are divided into 4 groups. The largest one, about 60 objects, the Xiangnu Xianbei burials, and in recent years, these mounds have been the main suppliers of archaeological findings. The excursion will definitely continue with a survey of archaeological sites, which we will do as well. The Berel necropolis covers a huge time span. Since the 4th century BC, these are Saka burial mounds. The junction of the millennia is the Xiangnu Xianbei burials. Archaeologists also found burial grounds of the early Turkic era here. The head of the archaeological team, Yeldos Kariev, is a senior researcher at the Altai Tanu Center. He's a history teacher at the Amanjol of East Kazakhstan University and holds a Master of Archaeology and Ethnology. Well, here we are on the territory of the Xiangnu Xianbei group of monuments of the Berel necropolis. Systematic work has been carried out here for 5 years. In general, these monuments have been known since the 19th century. Male and female burials with a small set of objects, with differences in funeral rites and in the design of the burial, tell archaeologists about the people who lived here 2,000 years ago. They themselves were a conglomerate of different tribes. They came from the territory of modern Mongolia, Transbaikalia, and along the way they conquered, subjugated, and took with them part of the male population. And when they came here, they subdued the local population. The scientist assumes that the alien tribes assimilated with the Sakas, but the latter managed to retain their power. Otherwise, how to explain that with the arrival of the Xianbei people, the necropolis continued to function and the new tribe buried its nobility next to the Pazyryk mounds? If we talk about the territory of Kazakhstan, the Xianbei lived at the turn of the millennium and the first half of our millennium before the period of the Turkic Khaganates. It's believed that they are Mongol-speaking tribes, in contrast to the Xiangnu, who are considered Turkic-speaking, and they were irreconcilable enemies. The cemeteries of Berel are called the Xiangnu Xianbei because of the similarity and kinship of these two cultures. At one time, it was the movement to the west of the Xianbei people that launched the Great Migration of People, which completely changed the history of the continent. The Berel cemeteries are a chronicle of this era, which for the first time are studied in such detail in Kazakhstan. Warlike nomads, horsemen archers, their graves indicate that many died far from their homes. The tribe erected a cenotaph, an empty ritual burial. In general, unlike the kurgans, the graves are shallow, with a single-layer stone embankment. Each burial is a special story, but one became a symbol of that transitional time. Men and women are buried holding hands. There were 2 horses here. It indicates nobility. They differ in anthropological type. The male is a more classical Caucasian, Saka type with a square jaw, Nordic type, and Mongoloid women. The couple's skulls were given for reconstruction, and now in the museum, you can see what this union looked like. The union of a descendant of the Sakas who retained the power of their ancestors and a girl from the alien Xianbei tribe. The initiator of research in the Berel Valley, Doctor of Historical Sciences Zainullah Samashev, has been spending a huge share of the field season here for more than 20 years. In the administrative building, the professor collected a huge specialized library dedicated to research at the Berel necropolis. Zainullah sees his mission as the creation of a center for international Alta studies.
Сам музей задумывался как некий культурно.
The museum was conceived as a cultural, educational, patriotic center of the entire region. Because it is located very well at the junction of the territories of several states, such a center is very necessary here.
И здесь функционирование такого центра, в общем-то, очень необходимо.
According to Zainullah Samashev's plan, the museum should be housed in a stone building equipped for storing and studying rare exhibits, an ethnographic hall, and a center for the manufacture of souvenirs using ancient technology from local materials should be built there. It is imperative to build a visiting center and develop tourism, says the scientist, while he takes us up to the gorge to the spring and looking at the trees supporting the rocks, talks about the mythical representations of the Sakas who were born here 3,000 years ago. Feeling the connection with the land, the professor literally talks to this land, and thanks to the work of archaeologists, these stories now have the status beyond time. We read the stories and our descendants will read them as well.